I was a really weird kid. I am often asked how I was as a child. People will say, John, we see how you are now. How were you as a child? I was a very weird kid. And I was weird in the weirdest of ways. Ways that never really gelled with my father. He never really understood me. And I think that's one of the big reasons we had issues, is because we never connected in that way. He just did not get me. But to tell you a couple of just small stories of me as a boy. Now these are stories I remember, and then I'll tell you a couple stories of my that I heard from my brothers and sisters that I don't remember. So I had imaginary friends as a child, and I would literally see them, and they would come over and they would talk to me, and I would have these imaginary friends. And the one main imaginary friends I had, I called Jimmy Garden. And Jimmy Garden was he was just my friend. He was my imaginary friend. I'm saying imaginary because I don't believe Jimmy Garden was imaginary. When I was 5 years old, I told my parents that the name Davis meant son of David. And we were the sons of David. And now at 5 years old, I had no clue what the son of David meant. But the son of David, being what they called Jeshua, and what the Judaics believe the Messiah would come from the lineage of David, right? The son of David. So I was literally saying that we were sons of David. My father didn't understand what I was saying and got very angry that I was saying I was some other man's son, which is just ridiculous. But I get mad at a 5-year-old because he's thinking that deeply. But that was, my mom was like, he's probably right. Actually, that's what she said. The name probably comes from son of David, historically. Because David's son, Davison, Davies, they all have the root origin that is believed to have come from the son of David. And so it's a very interesting element. During that same time, seeing my imaginary friends and such, my mom came out the back door one time, and my G.I. Joe was crucified. It was up on a cross in the backyard. Mom was not pleased with that one. And I had actually, now I don't know whether I had seen this at church or not, but I had actually put INRI above his head, which is Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. But I might have seen that on a Catholic statue somewhere. And my mom thought it was funny because I said, and I put INRI over his head. INRI. So one time when I was 5, a little bit older than 5, around the same time, around the time I was 5, my godparents had a mobile home down in Fenwick Island, Delaware, which was about a half an hour south of our house. But it was their summer house all winter long. They lived up in Wilmington, Delaware, a couple hours away. And my mom and dad got a phone call that said, "Hey, there's been a bunch of break-ins in our neighborhood where our trailer is, our mobile home is. Would you go check on our trailer?" So my mom and dad loaded the 6 kids, me being number 6, into their Volkswagen bus, and they drove down to Fenwick Island. Now, this was my godparents' house, and whenever I went to my godparents' house, I would go in on the porch. I would go over to their toy box that they had on the thing. I would get a truck. I would go out the front door. I'd cross over the little road, and right on the other side of the road, there's a little grass strip and then a small boardwalk. And I'd step off the boardwalk, which was about a foot off the sand, and I would play with the truck in the sand right by the bay. And that's exactly what I did. I got my truck, and I went over and I played, and they went checking the house. And after a while, I got up and I walked back over, and they were gone. There was nobody there, and the trailer was all locked up. And I realized I was alone. And I realized I was I'd been abandoned, basically, at 5. They were gone. I was crying and crying and crying. And a little boy comes up on a bicycle. He says, "What's going on? What's wrong?" I said, "They left me here." And then the little boy said, and I want to be very clear on what he said. He said, "You don't worry, they're coming back." Now, how would this little boy and this bicycle know this? You don't worry, they're coming back. I'll stay with you until they get here. And he sat there and he talked to me. And I'm crying, and I'm crying, and I'm crying, and like, and then he's just talking to me, and then he says, "They're here now, you'll be okay." And he went around the back of the mobile home, and around the front of the mobile home, pulled up the Volkswagen bus. My mom jumped out, ran to me, grabbed me. Very terrifying. My parents, this is their side of the story. They were driving north back to our home, and they were coming by one of the towns, and my father suggested that we get ice cream. And he said, "John, you want ice cream?" And my sister said, "John's not here. Johnny's not here." And they said, "What? He's not here." So they spun around. They were driving back to Femic Island. They had driven a good 15, 20 minutes up the highway. And so that was their experience. My experience was I finished playing, and then I had a time of crying, and then I had this young person talking to me, telling me it's going to be okay, and they're back now, and then they were there. My parents never saw the boy on the bike, never saw the little boy, because he went around the back of the building and they came around the front. They never experienced him. I believe this was one of my imaginary friends. In my life, I've had imaginary friends who came over to me, even when I was in my 30s and 40s. Every so often, an imaginary friend will show up, and they don't look imaginary. They look like real people, but they just have more information. They just know a little bit more, and they are really good guidance. So that's kind of weird, right? When I first learned about my past life stuff and all my experiences with that, my brother had said a story. It was really interesting. I had a website up for my comedy show, and there was a forum on there. And my brother had gone on there and wrote in this really cryptic. He was being funny, but what he was doing, he was basically listing stories from our childhood and acting as if he was I was there when young Hack, blah, and he pulled out all these stories. And in the bottom one of the stories says, "I was there when Hack, so mysteriously filled with helium, floated above his bed sheets." And I was like, "Well," I said, "What?" So I asked him, I said, "What was that about?" He says, "I'm surprised you don't remember. You were very young. You had a very high fever, and we were all in the room, and suddenly you were like, 'I'm taller than all of you. I'm on the ceiling. I'm up here.' And then I started talking to somebody. And as I was talking to somebody, they had no idea who I was talking to. And after a little while, my fever broke, and I was back in my body." So I had those kind of strange experiences in my childhood that I didn't really necessarily know were well, I didn't very much know about my own spirituality that I would be following now, but I think that we all have experiences in life that we don't necessarily remember that were very divine and very connected. And I think that we all had that experience in some form. We all had some sort of experiences that we just don't remember. And we also have some experiences that are written off, like telling a child they have an imaginary friend. In my opinion, it wasn't really an imaginary friend. It was just seeing another part of the oneness of God being expressed in some form. So I was a weird kid and went through a lot of traumas because of being a weird kid. But I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I experienced the weird kid phase, because now as I look back on my weird kid phase, it explains so much. It shows me some more. It fills out my story. It makes me have an expression of self that has more facets. And I look at those facets and I say, look at all these different ways I'm experiencing love. I'm experiencing love from these imaginary friends who are just there to help me. I'm experiencing love from a mother who was running from the van to hug me. I'm experiencing love from the mother who defended me against my father. And I'm experiencing love from literally having my mom laugh when I crucified my G.I. Joe, which she wasn't pleased about, but she thought it was funny when I said Inri. But all of those are facets of that life and of my life. And it's a beautiful thing. Look back on your life and find the moments that you might think of it as you might think of as childish folly, and consider whether or not it wasn't necessarily childish folly, but maybe it was something more. Take a look at your life. See what you find. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye. Thank you so much for watching. The John of New channel is solely funded by your generous donations and purchases of private readings and merchandise. To help out, go to johnofnew.com or use the donation link in the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.